Well, hey everybody, welcome back to part 3 of the JFK and Johnson years. In this section, we'll focus on NASA and America getting into space. You know, the Soviets had beaten us into space, of course, with the launching of Sputnik in 1957. And right after that, a lot of government agencies and industries really began working hard to try to duplicate or surpass what the Soviets did. Thus, these agencies and industries worked tremendously with NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, to place not only our own spacecraft into space, but hopefully a manned spacecraft. And that was the big race: is who could put a person into outer space first? Would it be us or the Soviets? Well, in April of 1961, the Soviets announced that Yuri Gagarin, one of their astronauts, was the first person to travel in space, that he had circled the Earth on the spacecraft VOSTOK. And this was a blow to the United States. Americans, this was kind of a rekindling of our fears that the US was falling behind the Soviet Union, that we were maybe falling farther behind than we previously were, and we needed to catch up. We needed something to boost our spirits and our morale and give us hope that we could not only equal what the Soviets had done, but surpass them. Well, we made that first effort to do so, first successful effort, in the form of Alan Shepard. On May 5th, 1961, just 23 days after the Soviets announced that Gagarin had gone into space, we put Alan Shepard into space. It was only a 15-minute flight. He reached an altitude of 115 miles, but it was a success. He made it back alive, and this gave America confidence that our space program was now on the right path toward equaling and even besting the Soviets. On May 25th, just 20 days after Alan Shepard made his flight, President Kennedy got up and issued a bold challenge to the country. And he had big plans for space. He said, quote, that the U.S. should, quote, commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon, unquote. A lot of Americans thought he was crazy, but people wanted to accept the challenge. And so the nation and the government did accept the challenge. Funding for NASA was increased. And less than a year after President Kennedy gave that speech, on February 20th, 1962, John Glenn, an American astronaut, completed 3 orbits around the Earth and landed in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bahamas. This was huge for the United States of America. This gave us confidence. This restored Americans' belief that we were number one, that we were able to beat the Soviets in what we set out to do. And it sounds kind of crazy and sounds kind of silly that that the space program was such a big deal at this time. But remember, this is the Cold War, and everything was a competition. And anything we could beat the Soviets in, especially something as big as going to space, that was a huge deal for us. And so this was a major win when John Glenn went 3 times around the Earth and came back safely. So that is just a brief little analysis of and synopsis of what was going on in the late 50s, early 60s with NASA and the space program. Thanks for watching.